Caleb, of Stephen, Jeanette, of the whole family. With that, I'd like to introduce Jeanette, Stephen, and Nathaniel.
Good morning. I thought I had it all prepared what I was going to say. But I think I'm just going to speak from the heart. And I apologize for the tears. But this is new to us. It's only been about 2.5 months since our son passed. When I was about 7 months pregnant, we found out that our son had trisomy 18. We had never heard of trisomy 18 before. We asked the doctors, well, how do we fix it? He has a bad heart and some other anomalies. And the doctor looked at us and said, you can't. He's incompatible with life. And I just kind of looked at him confused, thinking, well, aren't we all? And I said, well, what does that mean? And he said, well, your son may be born still. You may only have moments, but we prepare for death. This was not something that we were able to wrap our heads around, that we had to tell our family and our children of the reality of what our doctor was telling us. It happened to be right before Christmas when we found out. So we had a wonderful, compassionate doctor. But I think part of the problem is that sometimes when we're not sure, even within the medical community, if we're not sure of the future, if we're not sure of a diagnosis, there's not enough information, they tend to embrace what the textbooks say and leave faith on what medicine says. My husband and I decided we're going to lay our faith in God and let Him guide us and let Him decide, like it is written, when our son would be called home. At 9 months pregnant, we prepared for our son's funeral. That's the hardest thing to do. We did that, and about a month later, Caleb was coming into this world at 43 weeks. He decided he did not want to come too soon. So at 43 weeks, we went in to have Caleb. I can't tell you the emotions that we had. I'm like, how long do we have? I begged God. I said, please let me have 20 minutes. I said, no, please let me have 2 hours. Let me see my son. I want to hear him. I want to hear him cry. I want to see his eyes. Like he was born, he let out the most beautiful cry. I told my husband, go be with him. He fought. And I remember my husband coming back and saying, he had an extra thumb. And I just thought that was the most wonderful thing, that I have more to hold on to. Well, hours turned into days. We went home, but we did not know how to live with a child with trisomy 18. There's not a lot of information out there. There wasn't at the time. Most of the information out there was on bereavement, how to deal with death, but how do you live? So we went home. We never put our son down. We held him while he was sleeping, never knowing if that would be the last breath that he would take. But we still prayed and said, God, this is in your hands. Your will be done, and we will be faithful in what you decide, as hard as it may be. We celebrated every week with a birthday. Started to turn into months. I said, well, I better stop doing it every week, because having cake every week was just not going to work for me. So, and that was a joyous thing, so we turned it into monthly. And today happens to be his 32nd month of life. Would have been. We celebrate his birthdays still every month. So today he would have been 32 months. In this journey, I met some wonderful families. We started getting community groups together on Facebook. How do you live with a child with trisomy 18 or like condition? It has been a valuable resource because we've made lifelong friendships. We get to share medical information. We get to share milestones, heartbreaks. And the medical information has been probably the most important as far as living with a child with trisomy 18 is so new that many doctors don't know what to do or what to expect. We were very blessed. We had an incredible team of doctors, every ologist you can imagine. My son had a cardiac issue. He had a pulmonologist, a geneticist, and several other doctors. But along with his doctors, we chose that we're going to celebrate his life. We're not going to focus on the trisomy 18. We're going to focus on what can we do to give him a better quality of life, because that's what we all wish to have. None of us know when we will be called home. We just want to be loved, to have happiness, have friendships, have family. So along with his doctors, we gave him that. They celebrated his milestones with him, with us. They wanted to see him be the best that he can be, and he did. He loved life. He is my hero. He is what I would love to be. To love unconditionally, not have hate, to laugh at the simple things in life, like the lights that would flicker on the ceiling when the ceiling fan was going, to look at the leaves as the tree was blowing, to laugh at his brothers. They loved him so much. So often, we have to fit into this box of normal. And what does that mean? My son was more normal than I could ever imagine to be. And when we place people and children in this box, we lose sight of what their life can bring us. Sometimes we say children that are medically fragile are burdens. I can tell you that they're not. They're not burdens. We learn a different normal. They have taught us life lessons that we will carry on, and I think it is the way God would like it to be. For us to learn to love, to live and walk by faith. One of the things that they also would tell us is there's not a lot of value on a person who does not live very long. And I have a hard time with that. I said, because what is that magic number? At what point is there value in life? I still haven't had an answer yet. I'd like to think that if God were to take me home today, that my life was thought of as valuable. We have to place emphasis on what we can do in somebody's life and what they can give us in return. The smiles, the laughter. My children what they've learned in life, you can't learn from a textbook. The unconditional love, the compassion. We had a 7-year-old son, and I can tell you he has got the biggest spirit, the biggest soul. He may see me crying, he'll come up and he'll give me a hug and he'll say, I miss them too. See, losing a child that's medically fragile is not a relief. There is sadness. I would spend 100 years caring for my son. We want to be the voice for these children. So every child born, whether it's with trisomy 18, Down syndrome, trisomy 13, any condition is born into this world where people are going to fight for them and give them the best life possible. But we told our doctors we cannot control what God's plan is. When He will call us home, He will call us home. But until then, I want you to do all you can to help my son. When my son, when we were pregnant, we elected to not have the testing done. It was highly encouraged because I was considered of advanced maternal age. I was old. I said no because it wouldn't change anything for us. And I'm so glad that we chose that for us. Sometimes I think, and I've had friends that have had the testing done, and sometimes the doctor's perception changes. Instead of it being, how can we help you, it's, what's the point? And I pray that by advocating for our children that we can change that perception. Because ultimately, it's God's child. And we need to feel blessed for that. When you have, they talk about statistics. When you've got a high termination rate, as many of our children do, or families do, choose to do, I wonder how valid are those statistics? What is the child's potential? How do we know what the potential is if we don't give them the chance? Potential really is hindsight. My son, we were told, mentally delayed, would not do much. As you can see, he did so much, and he gave so much. We're blessed to have another family here. They're good friends of ours that we have never met in person. And her daughter, Riley, has trisomy 18 and trisomy 9. Beautiful young lady. We don't know potential. We don't know what God's plan is. She's a beautiful young lady. She goes to school. She drew me and my husband a beautiful picture to bring up here with us. And she has a huge heart. She came over and hugged me and wiped my tears from my face. That's God's child. And I'm so glad that she is able to share life with us. Thank you, Riley. I love you too. I also wanted to share that this morning before getting ready, we got word that one of our dear friends, their daughter has been called home. Baby Sophia has had a good fight, but she was called home today. So my thoughts and prayers are with her family. She was 2 years old. There's no relief. There's no relief. There's a lot of pain. But like I've always said, my husband has always said, we wouldn't trade one moment of that pain because that meant we loved so much. So through the tears, there's immense joy, and we can share that with others and give others hope. And that's our goal, is to advocate, to show families there's hope, even if it's for 1 minute, 1 year, 10 years, 20 years. If the baby's born still, you still fought. There was still meaning for that life. When my son had his surgery back in August, we knew he had obstructive apnea. And it started getting to where it was difficult for him to breathe at night. And we always said, all right, God, you tell us what we need to do. Guide us in our decisions. It's your will. It's what's good for our son, not what's necessarily good for us. We were privileged and blessed to have doctors that would pray with us. The time came for my son to have a simple surgery, to have his adenoids removed, to help him have a little more help in breathing at night. He had pulmonary hypertension. We were praying that it would help alleviate some of that and give his heart a rest. About 3 hours after he was at a surgery, he had a heart attack. We don't know why. Well, I think we know why. But it was not expected. Doctors fought hard. He was put back on a ventilator. Doctors worked diligently on trying to find out how to get him past this. And one of those decisions was doing a trach to alleviate some of that work on the heart. My husband and I said, okay, when he gets to where he can do it, let's go ahead and do that. A couple of days later, he went into a pulmonary hypertensive crisis. God said, we're done. Job well done, Kim. You've worked hard. It's time to come home. We called our family, called our friends. As I laid in the crib with him, we all sang, "You are my sunshine." I hadn't seen his eyes in days. His saturation levels, his oxygen saturation levels were about 70. And that was on a ventilator on life support. And we had a long day. And I said, God, I'm tired. We're tired. I want to take a nap. I want one more nap with my son. I put my hand on his heart, and I felt him get warm. His sat levels were to 91, higher than they had been in days. He opened his eyes, and they were as blue and as clear as it had been in a long time. And he did this thing with his nose all the time, and he did it for Mommy. We stayed there for a little bit. And then God said it's time. Took my son. So my son went from my arms to God's arms, surrounded by love. The way I pray that all of us could be, surrounded by love. And even though we miss him dearly, I know his work is not done. And I pray that we can be the voice for many children so that they can have a life and be given the chance to show love, an unconditional love like no other.
Not as well as speakers as my wife, so I'll give this a shot. Some of this may be repeating, but it's some of what I feel too. When we were diagnosed with the condition, we left the doctor's office crying in each other's arms, not knowing what to do. And after the 40 weeks, the doctor kept saying that eventually he'll be born. And we had one ultrasound prior, and we saw him in there. And I think at 42 weeks, we asked the doctor for another ultrasound. He didn't think it would be a great idea because he didn't want to see, I guess they felt that they didn't want us to see him pass if that would happen. And we looked at him and we told him, this is what we want. If this is all we have, this is what, if he's born still, right now he's alive. If this is all we get, all we have, this is what we want. So he wound up agreeing to it, and he gave us the ultrasound, and he was about twice as big as we expected. So I said, it's time. He needs to come out. And in the operating room, they had told us that he probably wouldn't cry, wouldn't make no noise. I was there with him when he was born. As soon as he came out and started crying, I broke down. It was like all my prayers were answered. I got to hear my son make noise. And after a couple of days in the hospital, the doctors pretty much didn't know what to do. They were basically just said, well, go home and spend the time that you have, however long it may be. They didn't give us a lot of time. They didn't know. So we went home. We spent as much time as we could. I took like 3 months off from work because I didn't know how much time I had with him, so I wanted to spend all the time I could. After 3 months, he was doing well. We had some help with hospice, and they were great, the doctors. So I went back to work, and my day consisted of going to work, and when I came home, I would shower and clean up and play with him and spend time with him. And I did that for 2.5 years. Part of what we are trying to do is to get the word out, because a lot of families around the country, the families are encouraged to abort because, like my wife said, the child won't be productive, will be a burden on the family. And we're trying to spread the word a little bit that, to try and encourage these families that there is a choice. It may only be a few minutes. It may be a few weeks. It may be a few years. But to experience that time and that joy with your child, you can never get that back. It's not something that you want to miss. And, that was one of the reasons why at 16 weeks, when we were asked about the testing, we told them no. It's not going to change our decision because no matter what the outcome, abortion is not an option for us. We're going to take whatever God gives us. God chose us to give us a child with a limited life, a short life, and with a lot of medical issues. But it changed us, and it changed a lot of lives. Going through my son's life, it was amazing to see how many lives, especially doctors, that he changed. We had doctors come up to us and tell us during his life and during his passing that he had changed the way they will always look at patients for the rest of their life. because of his diagnosis incompatible with life, but for what life he showed, how vibrant it was and how alive he was. I mean, doctors fell in love with him. And we had one doctor who was a very good advocate to him, that was at his funeral and came up to my wife and actually told my wife, she's a very respected doctor, that when we first went to see her, she thought, why are we here? Why are we trying so hard to help this child? What's the point? And then at her service, she said she'll never think that again about another child. You know, so for someone to say that your child's going to be born with medical issues, it's going to be a problem, you need to abort that child, you know, to take a burden off of you and off of society. How can you say that? I mean, my son in 2.5 years did more in his life than I have in my 40, and changed more lives, and is still changing lives. So, you know, to have that choice, to make that choice, it's not yours to make. You have to have faith, and you have to, you know, follow the path that God leads you in.
Somebody said that Caleb made God famous. And what an honor that is, that we were chosen to be Caleb's parents. I can't think of a bigger honor and blessing for that. We have made our lives public for that reason, to be able to share that hope with others. So if anybody has any questions or would like to know more about Caleb, I have information out there, and we pray we can reach other families one voice at a time. Thank you.